there are hundreds of thousands of proteins that are encoded by genes, meaning that every gene has potential to express multiple different ways. And epigenetics is tags that attach to the DNA and influence the way that the genes are expressed.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hi, my name is Sarah Clark. My mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. And most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Dr. Eizabeth Cherevaty to the podcast, and we're digging into how diet impacts your egg quality. So just give you a bio here on Eizabeth. So Dr. Eizabeth Cherevaty is an integrative fertility expert and the creator of the Well-Conceived Fertility Method, an evidence-based program to help women and couples build fertile foundations, break through obstacles to pregnancy, and bring their happy, healthy babies home. Dr. Cherevaty is a graduate of the University of Guelph and the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, and maintains a fertility-focused private practice as a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist. As the CEO and founder of Two Rivers Health, Dr. Cherevaty leads an empowered team of practitioners who work collaboratively with clients to help them create the lives they desire. Her mission is to inspire women globally to embrace their feminine power so they can create their own definition of having it all. She's the author of Let Your Fertility Shine and hosts the Natural Fertility Boost Camp private chat group as a positive space for women sharing the fertility and self-care journey. And check out her website at tworivershealth.ca. Before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Eizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I really find that most people that get into this line of work have their own story of how they got here. Maybe share with us how you decided to help women that are struggling to conceive.
Oh, absolutely. My journey with the world of fertility and perinatal health started when I was in naturopathic medical school. And I was actually focusing on pediatrics at that time. And what I noticed was that some of the health issues that these little ones were experiencing, we could trace some events back to mom's health in pregnancy or certain things that happened at the birth experience. And even starting to realize at that time that some of the things that happened before mom and dad conceived had perhaps made an imprint or an effect in their child's health and well-being. So at that time, we weren't really talking about the term epigenetics. This was over 10 years ago now. However, this is certainly something that is up and coming in our knowledge and our ability to work with people from this front. So epigenetics, I'm sure your listeners are hearing this word and are familiar, and we can talk more about that today in the episode if your listeners are interested in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then I went to a course and we were talking about chronic disease, things like autoimmune diseases, thyroid autoimmunity, and multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, allergies, these kind of chronic conditions that are definitely increasing. And in the literature, they're called non-communicable diseases. So it really means things that aren't infections. All the diseases that are not infections are actually on the rise in our society today. Mm-hmm. And the instructor was Dixon Tom, a renowned naturopathic doctor, and he had been in practice for over 30 years. And one of his major observations was, the way that he put it was, if we educate women before they conceive, we can start to eliminate chronic disease from the population by starting with investing in women and girls before they get pregnant. And so I realized everything that we'd be doing to help children be born with their optimal potential in place, their optimal genetic potential, everything that we'd be doing on that front would actually boost fertility too, since fertility is a function of health. It's so much deeper and richer than just getting sperm and egg together in the same room for a party. It's all of that is nested in this complex issue that we can describe as lifestyle or environment. So I became very passionate about that. And then I started to attend births as a doula, and in my practice, worked with a lot of children and fertility to make that investment in the next generation and leave this world a healthier place than we've made it and that we have had it. Since there are, tens of thousands, over 85,000 industrial chemicals now present in the environment that weren't even here 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And since women and men face tremendous challenges around stress, around nutrient depleted diets and food and all of these different types of exposures, we can really invest a lot in the health of the next generation of our families and our world through preconception health. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I love this because it's really, because women come to me, same to you, and they're in this panic to either to rush off to IVF or really to get pregnant right now. And it's like, take a step back, listen to what your body's saying. And then it's usually, it's not just infertility, there's other things going on in the body. And as you're saying, you started off by seeing children that had health issues. And that happened for me. I was diagnosed with POF at 28, went off and had, lucky enough to have my children with donor eggs. And then because I had no clue any of these weird health symptoms I had, like sinusitis and bladder issues, all these things were connected to, my fertility. I kind of looked at it separately. Both my kids ended up having tubes in their ears, tonsils removed, adenoids removed, chronic sinusitis, all these things. And then we changed their diet and lifestyle, and these seemingly chronic things went away. But it's almost when talking to women, they're sort of reluctant to focus on their own health. But when you start talking about their children, they become a little more, oh wait, okay, maybe I should take this time.
Of course. Yeah. And it's very natural that going into a pregnancy or hoping for a pregnancy would inspire that. And, I'd love to see this become part of more of an earlier education point in our lives as teens or as young women as well, right? Because no one is teaching us this stuff in a systemic way. And as Dixon Tom said, women before conception are the most important population to invest in from a public health perspective.
Absolutely.
However, your experience too shows the impact of epigenetics in that within one generation, your kids may have been born with these certain conditions and symptoms or grown up with their early childhood with that. However, with diet and lifestyle interventions, now they're reversed. So we tend to think of issues and chronic diseases being inherited. So, it runs my family, so I'm going to have this. However, you can make changes within this generation, within this one person, and radically transform that child or adult's health, because our bodies are in a state of renewal constantly. It's so miraculous. We forget that every cell has a predetermined lifespan and is preparing to basically copy its DNA and birth a new cell all the time. We're always regenerating. We're always building new tissues. Certainly we see that with the menstrual cycle. Of course, we're shedding lining and building new tissue there. We're building new brain cells. We're building new muscle cells, etc. So there's a tremendous transformation in a matter of months because of if we're providing the right building blocks physically, mentally, and emotionally, the cells are going to develop in that context, basically like expecting the best from life. And it's really, really miraculous, just like you've seen in your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me just dig into that a little bit. So talking about egg health. So a lot of women may have been told, and people come to me more because I've shared my story with POF. So it's typically get women that are experiencing, low AMH or high FSH, low ovarian reserve, premature ovarian failure, unexplained infertility, other types as well. But because I'm more vocal with my story, I seem to get a lot of those women, and they've been told that your eggs are not healthy. They're either too old or your eggs are just not healthy. And your only option is a donor egg, which is what I was told. Sorry, you're in premature ovarian failure, game over, donor egg for you. Yeah. Can you discuss how the cycle of the egg and why diet and lifestyle changes are so impactful?
Absolutely, Sarah. This is so exciting, as I'm sure you've shared with your clients. We know so much more about egg health in the past 10 years than ever before, and some really interesting observations have been made even in the past few years that relate to this. So first of all, it's important to know that while many, many women are being told their eggs are too old, that's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. We can't test egg quality. We can test it indirectly or observe indirectly through a number of ways, one being past pregnancy success or success with IVF or the quality or health of embryos. Secondly, AMH, it's only an indirect measure of egg reserve and quality. It may not even be a great measure of quality. It's a good predictor of IVF, of the number of eggs that will be retrieved through an IVF cycle, but it must not be used to predict a woman's fertility success, particularly with natural conception.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, that's a really important point, because I think the AMH people, everyone comes to me and they know exactly what their AMH is, and that low AMH is embedded in their mind, and their RE
Yes.
telling them, sorry, your chances are low.
Yes, it's so disheartening. So the RE almost is more likely to dismiss them from his or her care because they want the best statistics for their practice, of course, and they want to make the best choice for the patient in terms of their ability or their chances of having a successful IVF. So REs can use the AMH to help them just determine how many eggs will be retrieved through that cycle, but it doesn't relate to egg quality the way that we think it does, and it doesn't relate to your ultimate fertility success. So that number, especially if it's sort of 1 or around there, is so heartbreaking to women. However, we need to remember that women have conceived healthy children with an AMH of 0.
Yeah.
0. So having it be low is really needs to be taken into context with 2 factors. One, your chronological age, since it naturally goes down with age, and 2, your FSH level. So as FSH naturally increases with chronological age, inherently the AMH will decrease. It's kind of like when AMH is sort of low, well below 10, for example, AMH may tend to be higher, but that's correlated with age. And when the factor of a woman's age is removed from the statistics, AMH alone does not predict fertility success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people with the FSH for IVF, they may not touch it if it's usually under 12 10 to 12. They won't look at it.
That's right.
Kind of like it's too high.
However, both of those hormones can also change.
Right.
So with repeat testing, with several months down the road, they can be essentially improved. They can look better. The FSH can be lower again, and the AMH can be higher. So the AMH is really following along FSH in an opposite way. So one goes down, the other goes up. But FSH is more in response to the GnRH pulsatile hormone regulation. And again, with higher FSH, into the teens and 20s and even 30s, that can also come down. So that could be cycle to cycle. You can see that change. It's not to say that it's easy or very predictable, but it is definitely possible.
Just for 1 second, go back. Did you say GnH?
GnRH.
Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
So gonadotropin releasing hormone is released in the brain. Mm-hmm. So that is a hormone that's coming in response to other hormones stimulating it. So there's an orchestra, a conversation between estrogen and FSH and LH and the egg and the ovary. And these are all in a coordination. And what many people don't realize is that the GnRH pulse is one of the things that stimulates and really guides the whole orchestra. It's not the conductor. I consider melatonin to be the conductor, but it's kind of like the lead violin. So when that lead violin comes into tune, then the other hormones are going to follow. And so we can use therapies, including, things like acupuncture, to actually help regulate this hormonal orchestra and start to see changes in the hormones.
And as far as, maybe we'll just kind of dig into the cycle a little bit, as far as it takes an average of 90 to 100, sometimes you see 90, sometimes you see 100, but an average of 90 to 100 days to improve egg health.
That's right.
Can you maybe take us through that timing?
Sure. Yes. This is a really interesting thing too, because so we can kind of think of your eggs as being a little bit asleep. And then sort of T-3 months, or about 90 to 100 days before one particular egg will be ovulated, there's a recruitment that happens. So the body recruits the best follicles and then starts to nurture that one follicle to bring it from a secondary follicle to a primary follicle. So the follicle is the sac filled with fluid and nutrients that is hosting the egg prior to ovulation. So what we can measure in relation to egg health is the follicles, because you can see on an ultrasound, you can see the follicle numbers, you can see how much fluid is in them, their relative size, and they can actually measure their size. So that's one of the things that if you've gone through IVF, you will remember. You're looking for a primary or a dominant follicle to be looking like it is the solo one ready to be ovulated in the pre-ovulation stage of her cycle. So that's leading up to day 14. So between sort of day 10 and 12, that there will be one dominant follicle that will be clearly noticeable on an ultrasound. That is the one that's ready to be ovulated. So in that T-90 days or 100 days, a lot of nutrition is invested in that one egg or follicle. It consumes a vast amount of energy. It's kind of like preparing for a marathon. So marathoners will train and they will consume all the right nutrients and seemingly high levels of nutrients so that they can work up to their full capacity for the day of the run. So this preparation time gives us a phenomenal window to invest in a woman's health and nutrition, blood flow to the pelvis, blood flow to the ovaries and reproductive system, in order to help guarantee that there's ample circulation to deliver nutrients and ample circulation or lymphatic flow to remove toxins and inflammatory compounds.
Great. Yeah. So really spending that 90 to 100 days that we talked about in the beginning with the preconception health. And maybe now is the time to kind of for you to dig a little more into the epigenetics, if you could.
Sure, absolutely. So epigenetics refers to basically on top of the genes. And we've tended to think about your genome or your genetic code or your DNA to be this sort of carved in stone set outcome. And people think, again, oh, my grandma had high blood pressure, my mom had high blood pressure, so I'm obviously going to have high blood pressure. Or my mom has hypothyroidism and I'm going to have hyperthyroidism. Or my sisters had trouble conceiving, so I'm going to. So what we forget, though, and this was really discovered when the human genome was completed. So it was thought that there would be like hundreds of thousands of genes in our genome, but we realized that there were only 30,000 or so. However, there are hundreds of thousands of proteins that are encoded by genes, meaning that every gene has potential to express multiple different ways. And epigenetics is kind of like the tags that attach to the DNA and influence the way that the genes are expressed. So epigenetic factors can upregulate genes, so it can turn on a gene. It can downregulate, so it can dial down or turn off a gene. And that means that we have tremendous potential to essentially speak to our genetic potential and optimize it, particularly by helping women and men before conception, investing in egg health, and of course, investing in sperm health too. And so like examples, there's so many examples. There's different nutrients that seem to turn on positive outcomes. There are definitely toxins For example, if you look at sperm, we can study it a lot easier than we can study eggs with regard to epigenetics, because of how readily sperm are made and how readily they're made in context of an exposure. So, for example, men who were pesticide spraying farm workers, they had infertility in their lineage show up 5 generations later. So the males from the male descendants of a male who was working in the field of spraying pesticides several times a year had less fertility in terms of his sperm quality than his great-great-grandfather. So, and there's evidence now of up to 15 generations of epigenetic tags from both men and women. And when you think about it, say a woman is pregnant and she's pregnant with a girl. So her daughter's eggs are also inside her body during that pregnancy. And when we see in something like smoking, so if a grandmother smoked during pregnancy with a girl, and that girl grew up and became a mother herself, then her child, so the grandchild, has an even greater risk of asthma than her mother. So those genetic influences, so again, that was the grandmother smoking while her grandchild was an egg inside her daughter as a fetus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
yeah.
Crazy.
It's crazy. So we are carrying the next generation during pregnancy, and that means that we want to optimize our health and our ability to create that heritage and that legacy before conception. It's the greatest expression of love that I can even think of.
Mm-hmm. And actually go back and check out episode 17 we talk about organics, going organic, and why it's really important to do that when you talked about sperm health impacting, your generations. I had a guest from Moms Across America, and she just talked about how, I think she said in 20 years, basically our ability to produce naturally is threatened because of all the glyphosate, which is weed killer and linked to infertility and all sorts of other health diseases. It's affecting our sperm as well as egg health. So episode 17, check that out. And then, definitely like with that 90 to 100 days average to really make these massive changes. So, even though you do have, as you were saying, if there's thyroidism if you have thyroid issues or, issues conceiving, and maybe your sister did too, just because they did, diet or lifestyle will either, as you explained, turn on or off disease. And it's not your destiny.
That's right. It's so phenomenal. Mm-hmm. So encouraging.
Mm-hmm, exactly. It's empowering to know, and really in that short period of time, 3 to 4 months, you can make, massive change in the generations to come. It can be so that's like super.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So why don't we'll dig maybe into some foods here to help with egg health, where people can start. Yeah,
great question. Well, in the scientific literature, there aren't great resources in terms of studies. So one thing is that nutrition has some challenges in terms of studying, because one, people tend to not remember what they actually ate if you're recording it after the fact. Two, there's so many other factors going on in the lifestyle at large. So a lot of the things that we know about egg health and nutrients does come from animal studies as well as in vitro studies, where eggs are put into different culture media in the petri dish and observe what happens with them. In population studies in humans, though, it's pretty clear on ovulatory function. So again, this isn't a direct measure of egg quality, but it is a measure of egg health in a way, because women who have problems with ovulation, clearly those eggs and follicles aren't developing to the point of maturation and ovulation the way they could be. So what we know that sort of hinders or slows down egg health from the ovulatory perspective are 3 major food categories. And this is from the Nurses' Health Study, a huge study of women who all happen to be nurses. And they tracked what they ate. So we know that white sugar,
Mm-hmm.
like refined sugar of all kinds, and trans fats, which are the types of fats that are found in hydrogenated vegetable oils, often fryer oils, and white flour based products are the three foods, or what I call them anti-food categories, because they're not really foods. They're so processed, and they don't occur in nature. Trans fats occur in minute quantities in natural dairy products, but not in the quantities, say, in a hydrogenated shortening, for example, or pastries. So sugar and white flour and hydrogenated fats, or trans fats, do have statistically significant interruptions or inhibitions of ovulation in women. So we know that much is true. And that's probably due to the role of oxidative stress. So that is the major component that's a major thing we consider when we're talking about foods for egg health. So that's why we encourage, and as I know you do as well, Sarah, a diet rich in whole foods and low in inflammatory foods.
Mm-hmm.
So when something like white flour, white sugar, hydrogenated fats are in the diet, they go into the body and they create damage. They create what's called oxidative stress. So it's similar to that annoying bit of rust that keeps growing on your old car, and it just keeps growing and growing, and it just eats away and completely transforms the well-being of your car. It eats it away. And similarly with different foods that create inflammation, it's like it's damaging either the DNA inside the cell or the membrane around the cell that keeps it intact, to the point of cellular destruction. And those damages can be inherited. So again, if DNA is damaged or altered, those can be inherited to the next generation, which we don't want. So in a whole foods-based diet, which is rich in fruits and vegetables and healthy fats, this can be very protective against the free radical damage. Free radical damage or oxidative stress is happening regardless. It's happening all the time, every day, as a normal part of every cell's metabolism, every cell's being alive. However, we need to mop up that damage faster than it's being generated if we're going to expect optimum egg health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, that Harvard nurses study, the study of 18,000 nurses over the course of 8 years, it gave, I think it's over a list of 10 different things, diet and lifestyle. It's the book for the fertility diet, all based on that.
That's right. That's right.
We take it a step further and kind of use add in the tools of functional medicine in there, because they talk about whole grains are slow carbs, I guess, which are fine. But if you have a gluten issue, then you want to sort of see if you have issues with that first. But yeah, the fertility diet is definitely a good thing to check out.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That gives you some really great basics that have come out of big, large population studies in women. Also, there's some good evidence around Mediterranean diet and fertility in general. I'm not aware of any studies that looked at egg health in particular, but the Mediterranean diet, of all the quote unquote diets out there, has been the most studied and the most significant one in terms of impacting fertility success for couples. And and you make a great point. We can definitely expand on that, Sarah, on the findings there, by looking at individual nutritional needs or nutritional sensitivities. Absolutely. So one piece of the puzzle that seems to be helpful in our population at the clinic is making sure women have enough protein-rich foods, particularly foods rich in arginine. So the arginine does have a role in egg quality, in the egg's metabolism. It also promotes blood flow to the uterus and to to all the tissues. So, and that's interesting, because not everyone is going to tolerate arginine-rich foods, and particularly people who have cold sores or HSV, herpes simplex virus, should often avoid arginine-rich foods. And arginine-rich foods happen to be some of the ones that we often take out of the diet. So the richest sources are beef and turkey and meat and poultry and pork and even dairy. On the flip side, some people need to take some of those out of the diet because they tend to create inflammation for them. So you would have in your practice, Sarah, some functional testing around food sensitivities, yes?
Yes.
Yes. So that's one way to look at the inflammatory potential of particular foods in your diet. In all of the testing that I've done over, 10 years, I don't think I've ever seen anyone have an immunological intolerance to any of those animal proteins. I have seen lots of nuts come up, definitely dairy come up. But when you look at the data around something like PCOS, there's pretty good evidence that a paleo-type diet approach can be very helpful for them in restoring ovulation, which again is one other way that we kind of look at egg health indirectly.
Yeah, there's so much contradicting information on this, right? Because if you look at the fertility diet, they talk about, and I just interviewed actually an author, she has a cookbook called One Part Plant, so talking about just having one plant-based meal a day. And so in the fertility diet, they talked about women that had a higher use of animal protein had a 41% increase in ovulatory infertility. So it's really to be like, we use the food sensitivity testing to then figure out what's best for you, because maybe you may have a delayed reaction to. I've had people like on the IgG come back, it's, intolerant to poultry or beef. They could have something with, or it also could be the fact maybe they have a leaky gut, and that's why a snapshot in time, what they're eating right now, they're showing up as intolerant to it. So it's like that personalized diet approach. So you're saying with arginine rich foods to really, those are health for egg health, but I guess, and again, on a personalized approach.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, right? Because there is no one correct diet for everybody who's trying to conceive across the board. So we all do have an individual body and individual genetics and individual stressors. And so that's where working with someone who can help you identify which foods are working for you and which ones aren't can be so helpful. And just making sure that you have, a lot of women actually avoid fats because we've been taught for decades that fats make you fat. Mm-hmm. But fats don't make you fat because they don't raise insulin. And insulin is one of those factors that we need to get a handle on when we're looking at egg health, because high insulin levels end up blocking ovulation from happening, in that they bring testosterone levels up. And then the high testosterone, as in PCOS, will block ovulation. So that's stealing your chances of conceiving, but also stealing your chances of having really optimally healthy eggs being ovulated. But again, that's transformable within a couple of months.
Exactly. Yeah. And the healthy fats, check out, we have our episode number 16. We talk about healthy fats and how fats was it helps to form the baby's brain. So I did for years. I was having my little low fat yogurt after my lunch. Well, the fact it was loaded with sugar was probably not a good thing, but yeah, I thought it was, healthy, but because we were scared with that low fat craze, and really to make things without the fat, it doesn't taste too good. It tastes like cardboard. So they add all this sugar. So it's like the double whammy of that oxidative stress you talked about, sugar, and then also dairy, I guess, in there too, if you're intolerant. I
know. Doesn't it make you wonder what they did with all that dairy fat? Like, did they just make butter or cream? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, all the whey, and then they made all this whey protein, right? You're like, okay, all these whey supplements they've got. You're like, what?
Yeah. Then they figured out that we can sell that too as a separate thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I just want to get your take, and we kind of talked a little bit briefly about this, but sort of your take on people that are having a vegan or a vegetarian diet, and what your take on that is for egg health.
Great question. So I have seen far more vegetarian women who are trying to conceive than vegan. Vegan diets are statistically known to have have a greater risk of pregnancy complications. So if women are vegan, they absolutely need to be extremely careful about their levels of vitamin B12, vitamin D, omega-3 fats, and iron in particular. Iron alone is iron deficiency being the most common nutrient deficiency in the world, even in women who eat meat and who are sort of lacto-ovo or pesco-vegetarians. Sometimes we have trouble keeping their iron levels up because of menstruation, and probably because of absorbability due to gut health issues, and because iron is simply difficult to absorb we're built that way, since high levels of iron are very toxic. So the body has a natural mechanism to only absorb about 3 or 4% of the iron in our food, or even in most supplements, if we can absorb them at all from supplements, because a lot of supplements are very difficult to absorb iron from. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And there isn't a ton of research data on vegan and vegetarian with respect to fertility and conception success. However, there's no anthropological evidence of a totally vegan society, right? So we don't have any evidence from bones and from, finding things and realizing what people actually ate. And meanwhile, we do know that nutrients like vitamin D and like iron and like omega-3s, if deficient, are strong risks to infertility as well as to the fetal health if a woman does become pregnant. So personally, I do consume animal products. However, I practice pretty consciously about which ones I choose, and I don't eat a ton of animal products, but a little bit most days. Eggs or free-range poultry or grass-fed beef, those types of foods are actually the most nutrient dense. They're way more dense in nutrients than plants in terms of vitamins and minerals, whereas plants are where we are sourcing our fiber and our antioxidants. So both are important, and most of my nutritional advice encourages an omnivorous type of diet with good selectivity about the quality of animal protein.
Yeah, I agree. Like having that wild caught fish or the grass-fed meats and organic eggs and things like that.
Yeah, and they taste better. And for me personally, feeling what it felt like to try, I did try vegetarianism at one point.
Yep.
And I also have, for example, my sister, again, genetically similar, but she thrives on largely vegan and vegetarian food with maybe she'll have meat once or twice a week. And she's great with that. When I try to do that, like when I go visit her, I need to find other sources of meat to add into our meals sometimes because I need to take responsibility for my blood sugar, as my husband says. Yeah, I get hangry, and that's a sign of hormonal and metabolic stress, right? Mm-hmm. So hanger is low blood sugar, your cortisol level, your adrenaline level goes up. This does nothing to promote your fertility. So even as we want to balance our hormonal cycles over the calendar month, we also want to balance it on those sort of 2-hour, 4-hour windows during the day, because it all matters and it all adds up. So for me, I need protein almost every meal, like every meal actually, I'll have some protein. And I need meals that last me 4 to 5 hours, and I feel really good with that. And other people need to be more grazing, and they tolerate that. Whereas if I graze, I feel hangry all the time because it's kind of like I'm probably sensitive to the carbohydrates. So insulin, when we eat carbohydrates, insulin goes up, but it always overshoots that mark because it's, again, we're all built to just survive before we procreate. And insulin drives all that carbohydrate into my cells, meaning the brain is starving for glucose and thinks that I'm hungry. And so most women will often thrive with eating more than they think they should, particularly breakfast and lunch. Balancing their blood sugar has a great effect to help the nervous system and the adrenal glands calm. And it's basically you're proving with being well nourished and regularly nourished that your body doesn't need to go into that fight or flight and sort of famine preparation or famine survival state, which we know is impacting on epigenetics. So when we look at big picture studies like the Dutch hunger winter, where there were years, I believe it was 1943 and 44, where there was very little food available in Holland during the time of the Second World War. And the Dutch hunger winter study looked at, well, what happened to the people who were either children, like young children during that time, who were fetuses during mom's pregnancies during that Dutch hunger winter, or who were born following that famine. And the interesting thing was that it's the cohort who were fetuses. So if they were in utero during the Dutch hunger winter and their mother did not have enough to eat and she was on a starvation-based diet, they have statistically significantly increased risk of obesity and diabetes. So their bodies were tuned to, oh my goodness, there's not enough food. So everything that we see and encounter, we're going to have to store it. So we're going to have to be really good at making insulin, grab those carbohydrates and nutrients and drive them into our cells because we don't know when we're getting our next meal. That experience of mom, while she was pregnant, programmed that cohort. Meanwhile, the similarly aged cohort by just a couple of years who were either already born and they were young children and they also experienced famine, or who were born after the famine was over, they do not have that risk. And that's a dramatic way of explaining the role of epigenetics and nutrition and making sure that we have ample high-quality nutrients, including calories, but more importantly, the micronutrients that come along with those calories. So we can eat a calorie-sufficient diet, but have, actually be robbing our body of nutrients that are speaking to the baby as the baby's developing in utero. Or we can have a diet that's preparing our body to tell the baby we are nourished, we are safe, we are well, and that starts with the way that we take care of ourselves in the months before conception.
Yeah, I love that. The Dutch hunger study, it's called, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that's a powerful study of, back in the 40s. Awesome. And as far as staying hydrated, like a lot of us don't, we know we're supposed to drink our 8 glasses of water a day. And obviously depending on your height and weight, it could vary, but basically the eight glasses. Can you sort of share a little bit about that as how it's important for egg health and also cervical mucus too?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because something seemingly so simple could make a difference for us. But staying hydrated is very important. So one thing that adequate hydration will do is it basically plumps up the cells, including the egg, so that its fluid inside the cell fills out that membrane. And so that's nice and round and plump. And when that happens, so the membrane of the cell that's the wrapping around the cell that keeps the outside out and the inside in, that is very important. It's almost like, well, we have called the nucleus the cell's brain. That's where the DNA is held, but the membrane is more like the cell's brain, and that is involved in communication and control. So the membrane can basically decide what to bring in from the extracellular fluid, and the membrane can decide what to expel. And it's a very active kind of part of the cell machinery. And so if cells are dehydrated, it's kind of like shifting from nice, plump, juicy grapes where their membranes are like intact and touching each other to they're collapsed and involuted a little bit, so that imagine like going into raisins. So when they're raisins, they can't touch each other and they can't communicate. And even in specific transporter proteins, for example, could be involuted and hidden so that they can't bring in what they need. So then we get into sort of cellular dysfunction. And if you're dehydrated, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel maybe a little nauseous, obviously thirsty, you're going to feel headachy. It's a sign so that even your nervous system is starving for water. It's so absolutely required for cell function. And then when it comes to fertility also and cervical mucus, the fluidity is essential for the sperm to be able to pass through it. And so studies have shown that the slipperiness, or i.e. hydration of the mucus, is a factor in whether sperm are going to be able to go through. So when the cervical mucus when the body is fertile, in your fertile window, that mucus is transformed into a sticky form, into a slippery form, and the slipperiness is from, on a molecular level, there's channels being formed that sperm can pass through easily. So even if the channels are formed, imagine if it's all dried up and it's kind of like a riverbed that's more like mud. It's going to be harder to pass through than if it's nice, smooth, and it has a flow and a slipperiness to it. So you can't go wrong by being more hydrated than you think you need to be. Most of us are running on dehydration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to get yourself a stainless steel or a glass water bottle, make sure it's filtered water, because all the different
Mm-hmm.
pests, all the things that are in our water, a lot of birth control pills and other sorts of arsenic,
Yes. Yes.
fluoride and all that stuff. So I love a Berkey.
I have a Berkey
Oh,
too.
do you? Yeah. The
Yeah,
water
we
out of
love
the
it.
Berkey is like, I just said, the water just tastes like heaven. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, we love it. And it's made me hypersensitive to the smell and taste of tap water. It tastes like a pool.
I
And
know.
you're right, it does contain other people's medications
Mm.
and pesticides and heavy metals in trace quantities. And depending on your individual sensitivity, I mean, you would never drink that on purpose, but we want to rid our bodies of those chemicals before conception. So it's a great idea to have filtered water. Yeah, I love my Berkey. I love that it doesn't take any hydro, like it doesn't take any
Yeah.
electricity.
Just
Yeah.
you just fill it up with water and it filters it all out for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Berkey. Check that out. Okay, so as far as some supplements that you can think for egg health, you have a couple top 2 or 3 that you can think of?
Yeah, for sure. So melatonin is really might surprise some of the listeners, but melatonin is one of the best substances to help with fertility, looking at egg quality. So we talked about the pulsatile nature of hormones and how there's a conductor of that symphony, and that conductor is melatonin. So melatonin is naturally produced in the body, particularly at night, in the middle of the night, between 11 and 3 a.m. And it is an antioxidant as well as a substance that promotes our deep sleep. And when we have enough melatonin, we're going to get that deep sleep, and that also influences the way other hormones are secreted and pulsed. And we know from more recent research that taking melatonin can actually increase certain fertility outcomes. So reduces degenerated eggs, so kind of like is like an anti-aging substance for your eggs, and promotes healthier embryos. So the dose is fairly small. It's 1 to 3 milligrams. It's completely over-the-counter dose, and the only known side effect is potentially nightmares. It seems to be an issue, but it will happen for certain people. So for them, that's probably not a good choice if they're waking up from the nightmares or they're feeling disturbed by them. But most people tolerate it really well. Yeah, another one is coenzyme Q10 together with L-carnitine. And coenzyme Q10 is pretty popular and well known. So the doses in the studies for females for egg health and promoting fertility success are between 600 and 800 milligrams daily. However, there aren't necessarily studies that compared effects at lower doses, particularly if another combination of antioxidants is also used, as you will find this is done more in the male studies. For some reason, most of the sperm quality studies are combinations of antioxidants. So I'll often suggest, if we're going to be using coenzyme Q10, to partner that with L-carnitine, which is an antioxidant and a shuttler of that coenzyme Q10 into the cell. So they should be taken together. And the doses are approximately 250 to 500 milligrams a day of carnitine for females. And again, they tend to be higher in males. So often my female patients will take 1 capsule of their male partner's carnitine, and 1 or 2 of his CoQ10.
And what's your take on ubiquinol?
Oh, versus ubiquinone?
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be fairly equivalent within the body. So I would actually look at cost. So it's to my practice, they're equivalent.
Okay.
Because once in the body, they convert in the same way. They all convert into same forms through that cycle that the coenzyme Q10 is going into to, again, reduce oxidative stress.
Yeah, because some people will recommend over CoQ10 the ubiquinol.
Yes, that's right. And in the literature that I've seen, they are essentially equivalent from a fertility perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually a study of, I guess, fertility and sterility, and found that supplementing with CoQ10 helped with egg quality and fertilization rates. So yeah, but I just know that I've seen a lot of women that are been told to do ubiquinol. That's better than CoQ10. So it's, there's going to be all sorts of different advice.
And the studies are coming out all the time, so that's something that we definitely keep an eye on. But most of the supplements that we have used clinically are coenzyme Q10 or PQ10.
Okay.
Yeah. So PQ10, because of its ability to be absorbed easier than regular forms of CoQ10, but the standard form of CoQ10 is the ubiquinone, and PQ10, it has a 2.5 to 4.25 times more absorbability than ubiquinone.
Okay.
So it's getting the product into the bloodstream, but once in the bloodstream, ubiquinol and ubiquinone act similarly in the body.
Okay. And is there anything else that you would recommend?
Well, I love healthy fats, so those can come through the diet, and of course omega-3 supplementation. So if women are comfortable with taking a fish oil, I always recommend a high EPA and lower DHA combination for preconception as well. So high quality fats will help decrease oxidative stress in cell membranes, including in egg membranes, so can be very valuable from that perspective.
Yeah, and you can get ones that don't taste like fish.
Sure can.
I have one that's like an orange flavor. I'm like, because then people are like, "Oh, I got those fish burps. This is so disgusting."
Yeah, so. Fish burps are never fun. I usually work with a soft gel, which has had its oxygen removed, so there's no oxidation of the fish oil. Because once it's exposed to air, even air inside a bottle, it starts to oxidize. So if you're getting fishy burps, you're either not digesting it very fast at all, or you're taking it, it's already a bit rancid. Mm-hmm. So there are products out there in the market that are pretty high grade in terms of the natural preservative that they use to protect the fish oil from oxidation. Just like we don't want our cells to be oxidized, we don't want our oils to be oxidized. That's why, for example, we don't cook flaxseed oil, because it rapidly oxidizes. So that rotten fish smell is definitely something to keep turning your nose up to and find another source. There's some products in the market that have, say, vitamin E or green tea extracts to preserve their freshness naturally and minimize those awful burps.
That's right. Yeah, we also recommend, probably same as you, a methylated prenatal. We like Thorne Basic Prenatal.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Mm-hmm. Do you have what are things that you recommend there?
Oh yeah, so the prenatal formulas that I use similar from a couple different brands as well. Methylated Bs are great, and then an absorbable form of iron. I often will recommend testing for vitamin D status as well, and supplementing accordingly, since vitamin D deficiency is super common, very rarely tested in conventional fertility care, even in a fertility clinic. However, deficiency is correlated with IVF failure, whereas repleting vitamin D to a healthy status is associated with success.
Definitely. I know it's one of those ones that's missed so often. And
it's missed, but it's so easy to test and so affordable to supplement. Mm-hmm. And you feel a lot better with your vitamin D being adequate as well. Most people feel a little bit better energy. But vitamin D deficiency is very silent. It doesn't have its own set of symptoms. So that's why it's really important to check, because one, fertility potential, it's a hormone modulator. It affects the way estrogen and progesterone act at their receptors on the uterus and on estrogen and progesterone sensitive tissues. It's very fascinating. It is itself a hormone. And the definition of a hormone means it enters the cell nucleus and affects the DNA expression. And vitamin D is also important for programming the baby's immune system and for building up baby's bones during development in utero, as well as your bones as a mom.
Right. Yeah, we always
Yeah.
Yeah, we always recommend a test because sometimes people will supplement and it's like, okay, do you even know, because it is a hormone, do you know what your levels are?
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
though we are in Canada, and then you just sort of think, okay, your vitamin D is low, but it's still important to test.
I would say so, because then it helps you understand how much to take. And then if you follow up, whether you follow up in 6 months or longer, in context of how much you've been taking and how much sun exposure you've had, you can gauge whether that supplementation is effective, or if you can hold back, or if you need more.
Mm-hmm.
I've had one patient followed up. She had severely low vitamin D, so it was in the 50s, and she took it 5,000 units a day for 6 months, and we retested and it was only in the 60s.
Yeah.
So still deficient.
Yeah. It's important to be with a practitioner and kind of monitor it as you increase those levels.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And what about any herbs that you would recommend for egg health? Anything come to mind?
Well, the studies are fewer when it looks at botanical medicine and egg health directly, again, because most of the studies that we have on egg health reflect eggs having been retrieved and then cultured along with specific isolated nutrients like vitamins or antioxidants. However, there is a study that used chase tree, or Vitex agnus castus, it's called. It's a pretty well-known botanical medicine, and it's known to help increase progesterone levels in the luteal phase. So the interesting thing about that herb is that we don't know the mechanism of why it would impact on follicle quality or egg health, but we know that in many women who take it, they will see a significant increase in their progesterone production. So progesterone production in the second half of the cycle, which is the luteal phase, is secondary, or largely produced by the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is the remnant of the follicle that held the egg prior to ovulation, and once the egg is released at ovulation, that follicle sac involutes, it turns into the corpus luteum, a little progesterone producing machine that is responsible for producing progesterone to supply the body with enough of that to maintain conditions for implantation and early pregnancy until the placenta in the pregnancy can take over that role. So that's where, again, progesterone is an indirect measure of egg quality, or at least follicle quality, and Vitex can significantly aid with that one. And then in general with herbal medicine, we're looking at a more holistic picture. So we can choose botanicals that relate to thyroid, adrenal, estrogen, progesterone ratios, her energy, her moods, her mental well-being. And although we don't have specific chemical-based studies on why they work, we can see that those do, and with individualized prescriptions, they can increase fertility success.
Great. So Vitex, chaseberry, or is it chase tree too? Those three names are called, right?
Same thing, yeah. So chase tree is the overall shrub, and the berry is the berry that it produces, but it's used as that's the part that's used. It's the berries. Yeah, and then Vitex is its Latin name.
Right. And as far as acupuncture, this is a massive topic, so we'll just sort of touch on it briefly.
Sure.
How you're a licensed or trained acupuncturist. So how would this help with egg quality?
Oh yeah, so acupuncture, we know from several thousand years of traditional use in China helps fertility, and we're only starting to see the effect, the understand why that is. So it definitely has multiple areas that it helps with, and one of them being the increase in pelvic blood flow. So when needles are inserted at specific points, at specific times of a woman's cycle, they can definitely increase both the nervous system supply, so like the nerves that innervate the pelvis, as well as the blood flow itself. And when we do that, we know that we're increasing the parasympathetic nervous system activity. So parasympathetic nerves are like the opposite of fight or flight. So we have two departments of the autonomic nervous system, one being fight or flight, one being rest, digest, and procreate. So acupuncture treatment basically like switches on that rest, digest, procreate system which means that those functions that are in our organs that we don't normally feel happening, but that we need to be happening to optimize nutrition and blood flow to the ovaries to cultivate the healthiest possible eggs, that's what acupuncture can do.
How often do you recommend?
Normally, we see women getting the results fastest when we treat them about twice a week.
Okay.
So that's about half an hour, twice a week. You can definitely see results with once a week, and we treat them for at least 3 months, again, because we're looking at that 100-day window of preconception optimization. And in Chinese medicine, it was definitely practiced and expected that with any gynecological or fertility-related disorders, it would be 3 months of treatment. Probably in China, they treated a lot more. However, we don't want to add stress in terms of schedules to women's lifestyle. And usually they're doing lots of appointments. There was a study done in a large acupuncture fertility clinic down in Austin, Texas, and they compared the effects of acupuncture when provided once, twice, or 3 times per week. And although all approaches were effective in bringing about those results in her cycle and hormone balance and so forth, it was 40% faster with twice a week, but not additionally faster with 3 times per week. So twice is ideal unless that is really impossible for her schedule, in which case once is certainly adequate. And we see great results with that.
Yeah, I've seen I'd say the majority of people that come to me, they are doing acupuncture. It seems to be one of those quote unquote alternative treatments that people are like, okay, good. And even like an RE may recommend it. So it's published, it's well published in Fertility and Sterility about the impact to increase IVF. And as you mentioned there, to success as well. So it's a good option then, obviously then to improve egg health as well.
Yeah, it can have up to 60% improved IVF pregnancy rate, which is pretty dramatic for something that is so safe and that feels generally so good to receive. Yeah,
get all blissed out when you do it.
Yeah,
so
the acupuncture bliss.
Yeah, that's right. So, and as far as any resources you can recommend, anything that comes to mind as far as a book or a website or an app, anything you'd like to just share?
Oh, yes. Well, I take all of my information from the published literature and from research that's presented at conferences. So I tend to pick and choose. There isn't one particular book or resource. I mean, there's so many great ones to choose from, this podcast being one great evidence-based resource. We had talked about the fertility diet earlier in today's episode. And I think that's a really good place to start because it's a good study that explains what happened with real women's fertility in the real world, eating their normal everyday diets and what was observed. So it gives some really good options for people to start. And then I would highly recommend individual assessment and consultation because the whole world of fertility is very complex. It involves physical, mental, and emotional aspects, environmental, obviously hereditary, and it can really help to have someone with objective eyes and some experience to individualize a plan for you while you pick and choose and follow your own intuition about what is right for you at a particular stage of your journey. I always encourage women to qualify any advice that they're receiving or paths that they're being recommended to take with their own gut feeling or their own heart energy and their heart sense. Because ultimately this is your body, this is your baby, this is your life. And when you're trying to conceive and you're not yet successful, it can bring a lot up for you. And there's no reason to kind of rush into a particular paradigm. And there's also no reason to not throw everything at it, so to speak. However, we can get really stressed out by looking at all the resources out there because there's so many, and there's so many blogs and there's so many Facebook groups and so many forums. And then we kind of get stuck and kind of get into analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
And it's very anxiety producing because it's something that's so important to you. So we can even get worried about like, oh my gosh, I ate eggs today, or I had dairy, or I exercised, I had a great workout, but now I'm worried. Like
too vigorous. Yeah.
So or I didn't move enough. Like we can start second guessing everything. So whatever resources you choose, I just really recommend women get that sense of congruence with their inner guidance and inner intuition is so valuable at guiding you forward in a world that is overwhelming at times.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because we all have intuition, and it's just to actually just tune into it. Many of us, I was in the corporate world for many years and it got beaten out of me. It was always there. So it's really just to tune back into that intuition.
I appreciate that experience so much, Sarah, because I feel like the same in that after 8 years of studying sciences, I didn't think that I was intuitive at all. I thought everyone else is intuitive. My husband's way more intuitive than me. I just like any of the women that I worked with. And then finally letting my intuition start to shine through and realizing what that experience is like for me has been so valuable. But you're right, it is in everyone. It's just that it's either sort of stuffed or suppressed, or worse, in society kind of suppressed systematically, because it's seen to be less relevant, valuable, or intelligent as other types of intelligence that are maybe the more masculine versions.
Whereas it's that little voice telling you yes or no, and it's time to it's to listen to it.
Yeah, so we've all had an experience where we've shut that voice down until it made her sort of shut up, and then we've had a painful consequence of doing that. Yeah. So then we can look back and remember in an embodied way, okay, what did that feel like when I had that voice? And is that what I'm feeling now? Okay, so how can I respond to this voice in a way that's honoring, even if I don't have a logical or rational reason? Sometimes we think that we have to justify everything that we choose with some kind of logical rationale, or that someone else has to believe that our plan is right for us. But ultimately, you are given so much intuitive intelligence, and you are sovereign over your own body and your own treatment plan.
Love it. And as far as one success story you'd like to share with us, I'm sure you've got lots, but one that kind of sticks out for you.
Yeah, I can share a story about a woman who would be considered quote unquote advanced maternal age, one of those terms that we have a lot of discomfort with because of its implications, and how that became irrelevant. So I'll call her Tracy. And that's not her real name. But she came to start working with me at age 39, and she had one healthy daughter who was about 6 when we first met. And she and her husband had unexplained secondary infertility since around 4 years, since they've been basically open to having another baby, and now they really knew they wanted one before they couldn't anymore. So we started working, and there was a suggestion of possible blocked tubes, although the sonohistograms were basically inconclusive. So one was okay and a couple were not. And her physician had recommended IVF. So interestingly, the original reason why IVF was invented was to overcome blocked tubes. It wasn't to overcome all these other issues that we now have in our world. But she wasn't ready for that yet. So what we did was we looked at all those nutritional background, and we took advantage of the sort of 90 days that we've talked about together today, Sarah. And we identified severe vitamin D deficiency and iron deficiency. And so we started treating that, and she was feeling a lot better and more energy. And she followed an anti-inflammatory and whole foods diet, so the kind of fertility diet that we've talked about. And she did regular gentle exercise, and we did acupuncture almost once a week for the better part of a year. And it came to the point that her intuitive intelligence was saying it's time to return to the fertility clinic and let's try this IVF. So through that sonohystogram, one tube was still partially blocked or both. They couldn't tell if it was fluid or what exactly it would have been blocked with, or mucus, but they decided to go ahead with IVF, and they conceived on the very first try, and they have a healthy baby boy who's 1.
Mm.
And so she gave birth at age 41, right before she turned 41. And everybody's doing well. And now we're doing all the wonderful postpartum support that we get to do from a naturopathic perspective, because we get to work with people from preconception to pregnancy to birth, postpartum, and help them raise up their kids in vibrant well-being, which is it's just so beautiful and so exciting. And I love it. It's an honor, and it's a miracle every time.
Beautiful. I love that story. Beautiful. So you're offering the listeners here a conception confidence call. So it's valued at $97, and maybe to share what they'll get on that call.
Yeah, sure. So for women who are ready to take a next step in their fertility journey, and they might not be clear on what the most effective step might be for them, we'll jump on a call, and we'll get a great sense of what the next most effective step would be for her or for them. And we'll also decide if it's a good fit to work together, or what resources would be the ideal fit if it's not our clinic per se. We do help people both remotely and within our clinic, which is based in Guelph, Ontario, and have a great network of like-minded supports and practitioners and coaches who can help along the way too. So we'll get all that done within about 15-20 minutes, and hopefully that gives you a ton of value in your fertility journey, no matter where you are. And usually we can get right down to a couple of the major issues that are perhaps not obvious blocks, but that are certainly real ones that we can start to overcome.
Awesome. Love it. So they can check that out at Two Rivers Health. So TWORIVERS Health, HEALTH.ca. And we'll also have it in the podcast show notes with the link in there. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, sharing your wisdom about egg health. It was so informative. And thank you again.
It's a pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Great. Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call. And on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone. And I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to fabfertile.com and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells you about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you are a U.S. resident, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address, and you will receive our 3-day free fertility diet challenge. The challenge includes delicious chef-prepared recipes that are specifically designed to enhance your fertility. Download the recipes and try them this weekend. For U.S. residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345-345. For non-U.S. residents, go to www.fertilitydietfreebie.com to access your special gift. That is Fertility Diet Freebie, FERTILITY, Diet, D-I-E-T, freebie, FREEBIE.com to access the 3-day free fertility diet challenge. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman. He's the medical director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and the chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. What you find at the end of your fork is more powerful than anything you'll find at the bottom of a pill bottle. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.